The square was silent, except for the sound of chains dragging across the stone floor. The alien girl walked slowly, her head down, her small body trembling. Around her, tall figures of her own people stood like shadows, their eyes filled with cold judgment. Today was the day she would be cast out. Today was the day she would be left to die. Her name was Solari. She was young, barely grown. Yet in her society, she was already marked as worthless. She was sterile, unable to give children, and that was the greatest shame in her people's law. To them, she had no future, no value. Her very breath was seen as a waste of space. The council leader raised his hand. His voice was sharp, echoing across the silent square. By our ancient law, this girl is condemned. She will be taken to the wastelands. She will not return. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd, but no one spoke in her defense. Not a single voice cried out for her life. Even her own family stood with their faces turned away. Her mother's eyes were wet with tears, but she did not step forward. Her father kept his arms folded, his face hard like stone. Solari's knees shook. The guards pulled her forward. She felt the weight of every eye on her. She wanted to scream, to beg, but her throat was tight. Her voice was locked deep inside. The chains cut into her wrists, and she stumbled. Falling to her knees, the crowd did not move. They only watched as if she were nothing more than an insect. Crawling in the dirt, the path to the wasteland was long. The guards dragged her past the edge of the village, past the tall black towers, and out into the barren dust fields where no one survived. The air was dry, the wind sharp with sand. She could barely breathe. Her heart pounded with fear. At last, they threw her down near a cracked stone pillar. The chains were left tight. The guards did not even speak to her. They only turned their backs and walked away. Their steps faded into the distance until there was nothing but silence. Solari lifted her head. Her lips were dry, her throat burning. The sun glared down without mercy. She thought of her people. Of the home she would never see again, she thought. Of the word they had carved into her fate: sterile, unworthy, useless. She pressed her face into the dirt and wished the ground would swallow her. Hours passed, the heat grew worse. Her skin burned, her lips cracked. She tried to shift, but the chains held her still. Buzzing insects circled above, landing on her arms and legs. She shook but could not push them away as the sun began to sink. Shadows stretched across the desert floor. Her body trembled with weakness. Her mind began to fade. In that blur of pain and despair, she thought she saw something moving far away. A shape crossing the wasteland, tall and broad. At first, she believed it was death itself coming to take her. But as the figure came closer, she saw it was not an alien. It was a human. The man walked slowly, carrying a worn bag on his back. His clothes were patched and dusty. His face was marked with lines of sorrow. He was searching the wasteland for supplies. But what he found instead was a dying girl chained to the stones. He stopped in front of her. His eyes softened. His hand reached down to brush the sand from her face. She flinched, expecting pain, expecting mockery, but instead, his voice was quiet, filled with something she had never heard before: pity. Who would leave a child like this? He whispered, almost to himself. His voice was human, deep, and strange to her ears, but also gentle. Solari's lips moved. Her voice was broken, faint. I am nothing, she whispered. The man frowned, shaking his head. No one is nothing, he said firmly. For the first time in her life, someone's words did not cut her. They healed, even in her weakness. Her heart stirred with a tiny spark, a spark of hope she had thought was gone forever. But as the wind howled and the shadows grew, a dark truth pressed upon her mind. Her people would never forgive this. If they found out a human touched her, saved her, both of them would be hunted still. As the man pulled at her chains, Solarius' eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she wanted to live. For the first time, she felt the sentence of death might not be the end, but the beginning of something far greater. The chains were heavy, biting into Solari's thin arms. Her head hung low, her lips cracked from thirst. Yet when the human man knelt beside her, something inside her stirred. She had expected the end, not salvation. His hands were rough, scarred from years of labor, but they moved with care. He pulled at the metal bindings, frowning as if angry at the cruelty done to her. The chains were strong, too strong to break easily. Still, he would not give up. He searched his pack, pulling out tools worn by time. Solari's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Help me, she asked. The words were slow, her tongue heavy. She did not expect an answer. Humans were strange to her kind. Feared, hated, yet here he was, fighting her chains. The man looked at her, his eyes shadowed but kind. Because you are alive, he said softly, and no one deserves to die alone out here. His voice carried something she had never heard before: warmth. Her people had called her useless, cursed, but this human, this stranger, looked at her as if she mattered. Her chest ached, not from weakness, but from the strange feeling his words left inside. The lock finally snapped. The chains clattered to the dirt. Solari gasped, rubbing her sore wrists. She tried to stand, but her body shook too much. The man caught her before she fell. His arms were strong, steady, holding her upright. You can't stay here, he said, glancing at the barren wasteland stretching around them. You'll die before morning. He shifted her weight gently against his shoulder, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Solari felt shame and fear twist inside her. Her people had abandoned her, and now a human carried her. If the council learned of this, they would call her tainted. Worse than sterile, they would hunt him. 2. Her breath caught at the thought, but her voice was too weak to protest. Step by step, he walked across the dry land. The sun had sunk low, painting the desert in red and gold. His boots left deep marks in the sand. Carrying both his weight and hers, he moved with quiet strength, not once pausing to rest. The journey felt endless. Solari drifted in and out of sleep. Her head rested against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. Steady and calm, each sound reminded her that she was still alive. When her eyes opened again, she saw faint lights glowing in the distance. A small shelter stood at the edge of a broken ridge. It was patched together with wood and metal, smoke rising from a thin chimney. The man pushed the door open and carried her inside. The air smelled of fire and dried herbs, warmer than the wasteland's cold winds. He set her down carefully on a thin bed. She sank into the rough blankets. Still trembling, he knelt beside her, offering a cup of water. Her hands shook too badly, so he held it for her, tilting it slowly so she could sip. The water touched her lips, cool and life-giving. Tears welled in her eyes. She had begged her people for mercy, but they had given her only chains and death. Now, a stranger, a human, gave her water and shelter. She could not understand why. Rest, the man said gently. His voice carried a quiet authority, as though he had spoken these words to someone long ago. His eyes were distant for a moment, heavy with memory. Then he turned away to stoke the fire. Solari lay still, her heart racing with confusion. She wanted to ask his name, but fear held her tongue. What if he had saved her, only to use her? What if kindness was just another mask? Her people had taught her never to trust. But the warmth of the fire, the sound of his slow breathing, the weight of the blanket over her shoulders, all whispered something different for the first time since her sentence. She did not feel the cold touch of death. Outside, the wasteland winds howled, carrying distant echoes. She shivered, knowing the patrols might still search for her body. If they found out she had been saved, if they discovered she was alive. Both she and the human would be in grave danger. Yet even with fear pressing on her chest, Solari closed her eyes. Her last thought before sleep was not of chains or death, but of the strange man who refused to leave her behind. She wondered what kind of heart could still fight for a stranger. She wondered why it had to be human hands that broke her chains when her own people had turned away. And in that thought, hidden deep inside, a fragile hope began to grow. The first light of dawn spilled into the shelter, painting the walls in pale gold. Solari stirred beneath the thin blanket, her body sore but alive. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the smell of firewood and the faint sound of metal clinking reminded her he was not alone across the small room. The human man was working quietly. He crouched near a pot over the fire, stirring something with slow movements. His back was broad, his shoulders tired, yet steady. When he noticed her eyes open, he gave a small nod. "You're awake," he said simply. His voice was calm, steady, as though speaking to her was natural. Solari blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had spoken to her like that before, not as cursed, not as broken, just as a person. He held out a small bowl, steam rising from it. Ah! The smell made her stomach ache with sudden hunger. She hesitated, staring at the food. In her mind echoed the cruel voices of her people, telling her she did not deserve to eat, that she was nothing, worthless. The man's brow furrowed when she did not move. He pushed the bowl gently into her. "Hands, eat," he said firmly. "Not unkind, you need strength." Her fingers shook as she lifted the bowl. The warm liquid touched her lips, and tears filled her eyes. It was simple, rough food, yet to her it tasted like life itself. She ate slowly, every bite a reminder that she was still alive. When she looked up, the man was watching her, not with judgment, but with patience. He did not rush her. He did not turn away in disgust. He only waited, as if making sure she would not fall apart. Finally, she whispered, "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why do this for me?" The man looked into the fire. His jaw tightened. His eyes carried shadows of old pain, because no one should be left to die alone, he said at last. Then, quieter, he added, "I know what it means to lose everything." His words struck her like a spark in darkness. She wanted to ask more, but fear held her silent. Instead, she lowered her gaze, holding the bowl close as though it were the only safe thing she had. Days passed in quiet rhythm. The man spoke little, but his actions were steady. He brought her water, made her food, fixed her bandaged wrists. Solari said even less, yet her eyes followed him, curious, confused. Sometimes he would sit by the fire at night, sharpening tools or mending clothes. She would lie on the bed, pretending to sleep, listening to the sound of his breath. It was steady, like the beat of a heart she had forgotten could exist near her. One evening, as the fire crackled low, he placed a small wooden figure on the table. It was shaped like a child, rough but carefully made. Solari stared at it, puzzled. "You made this?" she asked softly. Her voice shook. Unused to speaking, he nodded. His face tightened. "For my daughter," he said. His tone was quiet, heavy. "She's gone now." Solari's throat closed. She did not know what to say. The word daughter echoed in her mind. A daughter he had lost, a daughter who would never return. She felt a strange ache for him, different from her own pain, but close enough to touch. That night, she whispered to herself, almost afraid he might hear, "He saved me. But maybe I was saving him too." Outside, the wasteland winds grew restless. Shadows moved on the horizon. Somewhere out there, alien patrols searched for her body. If they learned she lived, if they discovered a human had taken her in, both of them would be marked for death. One morning, she woke to find him gone from the shelter. Panic gripped her chest. She thought he had left her, abandoned her as her people had. She stumbled outside, the cold air biting at her skin. Then she saw him near the ridge, carrying heavy wood on his back. He turned and saw her. His tired face softened into the smallest of smiles. He walked back slowly, steady as always. She lowered her eyes. Embarrassed at her fear, he said nothing, but his silence was full of understanding. He set the wood down, then handed her a piece, showing her how to stack it for the first time. She did something with him, not for him. As the fire rose that night, Solari sat closer to him. She dared to speak a few human words he had taught. Her tongue stumbled, but he nodded in approval. That simple nod filled her chest with warmth she had never known. The bond between them was still fragile, woven with silence and small acts of kindness, but it was real, stronger than the chains that had once held her. And in the shadows beyond the firelight, unseen eyes were watching, alien patrols were drawing. Near the past she thought she had escaped was about to catch her again. The fire burned low, its light dancing across the rough walls of the shelter. Solari sat close, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. She had begun to feel the quiet rhythm of this place. Days of food, water, and silence. Nights of firelight and the steady presence of the human man. Yet something lingered in him, a weight she could not name. He spoke little, but his eyes carried shadows. When she asked small questions, he would answer, but never about himself. It was as if part of him lived in silence. Locked away from the world, that night Solari dared to break it. "What is your name?" she whispered. Her voice was timid, uncertain. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes softened. Then he spoke. "Daniel." The word felt heavy with memory. He rarely said his name aloud. Solari repeated it quietly, as if tasting it for the first time. "Daniel." The man gave a faint smile, then turned back to the fire. She could see the pain behind his smile. She could feel there was more. Something buried deep. Later, as the fire cracked and the night grew cold, Daniel sat with a piece of wood in his hands. He carved, slowly, carefully. Solari watched the figure take shape, another small child's toy, when he placed it on the table. She saw the sadness in his eyes. "Was it for her?" Solari asked softly. Daniel's hand stilled, his jaw tightened. He nodded once. "My daughter," he said. His voice was low. She was small, with hair like sunlight. She laughed even in hard times. "But sickness took her, and my wife not long after." His words cut the air like a blade. Solari's heart ached. She had thought her pain was sharp. But his loss was a wound that still bled. "I built this place for them," Daniel continued. Staring into the fire, "I worked, I fought, I survived, hoping they would live. But in the end, all I had left was silence." Solari lowered her eyes. She understood silence. She understood the sting of being cast aside, though different. Their wounds met in the same place, loneliness. For the first time, she reached out. Her small hand brushed his. He stiffened at first, then slowly let her touch stay. His hand was rough, scarred, but it trembled faintly under hers. "You saved me," she whispered. "But maybe you needed saving too." Daniel did not reply. But the look in his eyes was answer enough. Days passed, and she noticed how he always avoided the western ridge. When she asked why, he only shook his head one evening. Curiosity pulled her to climb it herself from the top. She saw small wooden crosses planted in the dirt. 2 of them, side by side. She froze. Realizing what they meant, her heart clenched. She turned back, and Daniel stood behind her. His face was pale in the fading light. He said nothing, but his eyes told the story. These were the graves of his wife and child. His secret pain, hidden just beyond sight. Solari's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracked. Daniel looked at her, then at the graves. His jaw worked, but no words came, only silence. the kind that carried the weight of years. That night, Solari sat closer to him than before. She did not speak, and neither did he, but their silence felt different now. Less empty, more shared. The days that followed grew heavier. Strange tracks appeared in the sand near the shelter. Solari's heart pounded when she saw them. Alien. Patrols were drawing near. Daniel studied the prints, his face grim. He said nothing. But the tension in his body spoke louder than words. Solari lay awake that night. Staring at the fire, her chest tightened with fear. Her people had abandoned her, yet they still hunted her shadow. If they found her alive, if they found her with him, they would destroy everything. But even with fear pressing on her, she glanced at Daniel. Asleep near the fire, his face was calm, lined with years of pain, and yet he had chosen to fight for her. She realized then that she could not let him face his ghosts alone. Her heart whispered something dangerous, something new. She did not just want to survive. She wanted to protect him, as he had protected her, and far in the wasteland, under the pale moon, alien lights flickered. Patrols moved closer, bringing with them the storm that would test their fragile bond. The desert was quiet, but Daniel's eyes told a different story. He had seen the tracks, deep in the sand, not far from the ridge, too many boots. Too close to the shelter, alien patrols were searching, and they were drawing near. Solari sat by the fire, her hands shaking as she held a wooden cup. She noticed his silence, the tightness in his shoulders. She asked in a whisper, "They're coming, aren't they?" Daniel nodded slowly. His jaw was set, his eyes cold. "Yes," he said. "They will find this place if we are not careful." Her heart pounded. Her people had abandoned her, called her cursed, yet they still wanted her death if they found her alive. They would not stop until she was gone, and if they discovered she was with a human, Daniel would be punished too. Daniel stood, pulling out tools from the shelf. He checked his old rifle, a weapon patched many times. He moved with steady hands, but Solari saw the storm brewing inside him. He had faced danger before, but never with her at his side. "Hide," he told her, his voice firm. "If they come, stay silent. Do not move, do not make a sound." Solari's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him she would not leave him to fight alone, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded, her eyes burning. That night, the winds howled across the desert. Solari lay in the small cellar beneath the shelter. Darkness pressing around her, she could hear Daniel above, moving quietly, setting traps, checking the fire. His footsteps were steady, but each sound carried weight. Her breath came shallow. Every creak of the wood made her flinch. Every gust of wind felt like the whisper of approaching enemies. She hugged herself tightly, her heart racing. Then, faint but sharp, she heard the sound of voices outside. Harsh, familiar, alien words carried by the wind. Patrols. Daniel crouched by the door. His hand gripped the rifle, his eyes narrowed as he listened. He could see their shadows moving against the pale moonlight. Tall, armed, searching, they fanned out. Scanning the sand, looking for signs of life. One of them stepped closer to the shelter. His boots crunched against the stones. His sharp eyes caught the faintest detail. The door slightly cracked open. Solari, hidden below, pressed her hands to her mouth to stop a gasp. She could hear footsteps above her, heavier now. She could feel the danger closing in. The alien scout pushed the door wider. His hand reached for his weapon, but before he could move further, Daniel stepped from the shadows, his rifle raised. "Das," burning with a fierce light. "Leave." Daniel's voice cut the air like a blade. It was not loud, but it carried power. The alien scout froze. His eyes narrowed. He shouted something in his language. And at once, more shadows closed in. Solari's heart pounded. She could hear the stomp of boots, the rattle of weapons. Daniel fired. The crack of the rifle echoed. Through the night, one alien fell. The others roared in anger, rushing toward the shelter. Solari's body shook. She wanted to stay hidden, but every scream outside tore at her heart. She could not let him fight alone. She crawled up from the cellar. Her eyes wide with fear, but her hands trembling with determination. Daniel turned, his face hard with battle. "Stay down," he barked. But she shook her head. Her voice was weak yet steady. "I won't leave you, together." They fought in the shadows of the desert, Daniel with his rifle, Solari with nothing but courage. She grabbed burning wood from the fire and swung it. Keeping one alien back, her small frame shook, but she did not run. The fight was fierce. Sparks of fire and cries of rage filling the night. Finally, the patrol pulled back, dragging their wounded. Their eyes burned with fury. But they retreated into the dark, leaving the shelter standing for now. Breathing hard, Daniel lowered his rifle, his hands shook, his chest heaved. Solari dropped the wood and fell to her knees. Her heart thundered in her chest. She looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "They'll come back," she whispered. Trembling, Daniel looked at her, his face pale in the firelight. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. His voice grim, "And next time, they'll bring more." The fire crackled between them. Their bond, once fragile, had been tested in blood. They had survived, but the hunt was far from over. And out in the wasteland, the alien patrols gathered. In greater numbers, preparing to strike again. The night after the attack was heavy with silence. Smoke curled up from the dying fire. Daniel sat at the edge of the shelter, his rifle across his knees. His eyes scanned the horizon. But his mind was far away. He knew the patrols would not stop. They would return. Stronger Solari sat close, her small hands clenched together. Her body still trembled from the battle, but her eyes held a strange light. She had not run. She had stood beside him, and that memory gave her strength. "They'll come again," she whispered. Her voice thin. Daniel nodded. Yes, his jaw was set, his eyes steady, and when they do, "We make our stand here," Solari's heart pounded. Fear pressed at her chest, but she looked at him and found courage in his steady voice. She swallowed hard and whispered, "Then I will fight too." Daniel turned to her sharply. "No," he said, his tone firm. "You've already been through enough. This is not your fight." Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "It is my fight," she said, her voice breaking yet strong. "They left me to die. They want me gone. But I am still here. I am still alive, and you gave me life. I won't let them take it away again." For a moment, Daniel stared at her, his face unreadable. Then slowly, he nodded. He saw the fire in her that reminded him of someone long gone, his daughter, his wife, the same stubborn courage. Together, they worked through the night. Daniel showed her how to set traps around the shelter, trip lines made of wire, sharp stakes hidden beneath sand. He handed her a small blade. Her hands shook as she held it, but she gripped it tightly. The desert wind howled, carrying with it the smell of dust and danger. They did not sleep. They sat by the fire, waiting. Each second stretched long. Each shadow looked like an enemy. And then, near dawn, they came. Alien figures emerged from the haze, larger in number this time, armored. Their weapons glinting under the weak sun. Their leader stepped forward, his voice loud, filled with scorn. "Human," he called out, "and the cursed one you hide. Give her up, and you may live." Daniel rose slowly, his rifle in hand. His voice rang out, steady and unshaken. "She is not cursed," he said. "She is alive, and I will not hand her to you." A murmur rippled through the patrol. Their leader's eyes narrowed, rage burning in his gaze, with a sharp command. The aliens surged forward. The battle erupted. Loud and fierce, Daniel fired, his shots sharp and precise. Solari darted among the shadows, setting off the traps they had prepared. The desert floor erupted with smoke and fire. Aliens stumbled, caught by hidden spikes. Tripped by wires, but still they pressed on. Stronger, relentless, Daniel fought with everything he had. His hands bled, his breath came hard, but he did not stop. Every time he fell back, Solari was there, pulling him up, her small blade flashing. Her courage burning brighter than her fear. One alien lunged toward her. Taller, stronger, Solari froze. But before the blade struck, Daniel threw himself between them. The weapon cut across his arm. Blood flowed, but his grip on his rifle held. Steady. With a roar, he struck the alien down. Solari's eyes filled with tears. She caught him as he staggered. "You're hurt," she cried. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. "I'm not done yet," he said. They stood back to back, human and alien girl fighting against the tide. Their breaths ragged. Their bodies pushed to the edge, but their will unbroken. At last, the patrol faltered. Their leader, seeing too many of his men fall, shouted for retreat. Slowly, the aliens pulled back, vanishing into the dust. Their angry voices faded with the wind, leaving silence behind. Daniel collapsed to his knees, his arm bleeding badly. Solari dropped beside him, pressing her small hands against the wound. Tears ran down her face. "Don't leave me," she begged. "Please don't leave me." Daniel looked at her, his face weak but calm. "I'm not leaving," he whispered. His hand, rough and blood-stained, touched her cheek. "Not as long as you need me." Solari clutched his hand, her tears falling onto it. For the first time, she realized her fear of death was gone, replaced by something far stronger, the will to protect the man who had given her life when her own people had taken it away. The sun rose slowly over the desert. Its light fell on the broken battlefield, on the scars of struggle, and on the two figures inside the shelter, battered but unbroken. The stand had been made, and though the war was not over, their bond was now stronger than any chain. The battlefield was quiet now. Only the wind moved across the desert, carrying the smell of smoke and dust. Solari sat beside Daniel, pressing cloth against his bleeding arm. Her hands were trembling, but she would not let go. She had seen him fight like a storm, refusing to fall, and now she would refuse to let him fade. Daniel's breath was shallow, but steady. His eyes opened slowly, meeting hers, still here. He whispered. His voice was weak, but calm. Solari's tears spilled. "Yes," she said, "and I won't let you go." Through the long hours of that day, she cared for him. She boiled water, cleaned his wound, wrapped it carefully with torn cloth. Her people had given her chains, but he had given her kindness. Now it was her turn. She whispered to him in both her tongue and the human words he had taught her, soft words that carried hope. Daniel watched her with tired eyes. He had once thought his life ended with the graves of his wife and daughter. But this alien girl, cast out and broken, had brought something back to him. A reason to fight, a reason to live. For days, they stayed hidden in the shelter. Daniel's strength returned. Slowly. Solari never left his side. She cooked simple food, fetched water from the ridge, kept the fire alive. Each act built a rhythm between them, a quiet bond stronger than blood. One evening, as the sun set in colors of fire and gold, Daniel stepped outside. Solari followed. Her small figure stood beside him, the desert stretching endless before them. In the distance, no patrols, no shadows, only silence. "They will come again," Solari whispered. Her voice was heavy. Daniel nodded. "Maybe," he said. "But we will be ready." She looked up at him, her eyes glowing in the fading light. Why risk so much for me? She asked. The question had burned in her heart since the day he broke her chains. Daniel's gaze turned to the horizon. His face was carved with sorrow and strength. Because no one saved my daughter, he said softly. I couldn't stop death from taking her. But when I found you, I couldn't walk away. Not again. Solari's heart ached. But not with sadness alone. It ached with something new. Something. Alive, she touched his hand, small against his scarred skin. Then let me be your family, she whispered. Her words were fragile but filled with courage. Daniel turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then he smiled. Faint, but real. Family, he repeated. The word, once buried with the graves of his wife and child, now carried new meaning. From that day, they began to build. Together, they gathered wood, stone, and metal. Daniel taught her how to craft, how to mend, how to survive. Solari learned quickly, her hands once bound now free to create. She laughed sometimes. Shy and small, but real. Daniel, who had forgotten. Laughter found himself smiling too. They built a wall around the shelter. Stronger than before, they dug deep for water. They planted small seeds in the dry soil. Each act was more than survival. It was hope. At night, they sat by the fire. Daniel, carving small figures of wood. Solari practicing human words. Sometimes she would tell stories from her people, stories of stars and old songs. Though her voice trembled at the memories, Daniel would listen in silence, giving her space in those nights. She no longer felt cursed. She no longer felt like nothing. She felt alive, seen, and wanted. One night, Solari whispered, "If they come again, if they try to take me, I won't run. I will fight. Because this is my home now." Daniel looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Then it is mine too," he said. His voice was steady, strong. The stars spread wide above them, endless and bright, the wasteland that had once been. Her grave now felt like the beginning of a life she had never imagined. A sterile girl once abandoned by her people had found something greater than blood. She had found a family, and Daniel. Once a lonely father who thought his heart was buried in the desert, now stood with someone who needed him as much as he needed her. Together, they had forged a bond unbroken by chains, untouched by death. As the fire burned and the desert winds whispered, two lives once shattered began to weave into one, not by chance, but by choice, not by blood, but by the courage to stand together. And so, in the heart of the wasteland, a new home was born.